So my second presentation for today is about the Greek dictionary weighting and use of assistive technology to enhance the communication of children with autism spectrum disorder. This is the subject of my PhD thesis, which I hope is going to be published soon. I will do my best to be as brief as possible. I try to include only the most important information from it, so I shall begin now. Introduction. Autism spectrum disorder is a complex neurodevelopmental disorder with its main characteristics being the atypical social interactions, repetitive and stereotypical interests, and communication deficits. Almost 30% of children with autism have limited or no verbal communication by the time they enter kindergarten. Communication deficits in children with ASD appear in the area of semantics, the ability to expand their vocabulary and understand the meaning of words; pragmatics, which is the social aspect of language; phonology, the sound structure in language; and morphosyntax, which is more related to grammar. During the second half of the 80s began to emerge a new area of science research, which is called augmentative and alternative communication. It's called AAC also. In 1988, new articles emerged in bibliography with this term, and the researchers Janis Light, David Boykelman, and Walter Wolters began to publish their research. And now I'm showing you the main categorization of AAC. There are many categorizations, but this one is referring to the absence or the appearance of technology in those means. And something important I missed to explain was that AAC refers to any system that helps someone who can't communicate physically to communicate in an alternative way. This can be a technological device, as you can see here, or it can use no technology at all, or low-tech technology. One mean of AAC, one very usually appearing means of AAC is the use of sign language. I'm going to discuss about the use of high-tech AAC, which is the circle you can see here. The methodology of my research, this second part is referring to the first part of my research. The second part is the application of technological means. This part is referring to the evaluation of communication skills of children with ASD and the categorization of concepts and vocabulary that emerged. And the second part, it's about the integration of this vocabulary in a high-tech AAC device and the investigation of its effectiveness in children with ASD in augmenting their communication and their speech. The research questions were 7 in total. The one is which are the most common concepts used by children with ASD? The second, is communication affected by age and gender? 3, is it possible for the range of vocabulary of children with ASD to be expanded? 4, is categorization of words according to context of use effective in maintaining them in their long-term memory? 5, is there a device that could enhance possibly the communication of children with autism? Number 6, is it possible that the frequency of speech is increased with the use of an AAC device? And number 7, is it possible for concepts that have been learned with the use of the AAC device to be generalized? I have to note that some of these research questions have been used in other theses as well, with similar subject and in other research articles. But for the first time, we attempted and managed to compile a Greek dictionary for children with autism in Greece. So the eligibility criteria for the participation in the research were an ASD diagnosis. An ASD diagnosis made by professionals, Kedasi and others. Absence of hearing or vision impairment, that was very crucial. Mother tongue had to be Greek. Attending school regularly without interruptions would be the best. And for the children to be among 5 and 13 years old. The participants were 158 participants with ASD among 5 and 13 years old. 52 typically developing participants participated as well. They were not included in the 158 I mentioned earlier. And there were 16 children with ASD that didn't complete the evaluation process. The evaluation tools were 3. The first one being raw PVT. Its full name is the Receptive One-Word Picture Vocabulary Test, number 2. It's a standardized receptive vocabulary evaluation. The translation was made by the researcher in cooperation with a speech-language pathologist. And the ADOS-2, which is a diagnostic semi-structured observation tool for children with autism. Word checklist was compiled by Zirpoli et al. It was adapted from a behavior checklist, and this list was completed by the researcher using words from receptive and expressive vocabulary evaluation. Test-retest reliability was used with a 10 days interval to check whether the results were reliable. A statistical analysis was made with a very well-known program SPSS. The level of statistical significance was 0.05. The quantitative variables were described by the measures of central position and the measures of variance and standard deviation, minimum and maximum value, and interquartile range. The quantitative variables were presented as multitude and percentage. The authors examined if continuous variables followed the normality assumption and that some of the tests that were used were Shapiro-Wilk, Kruskal-Wallis, post-hoc-Ponferroni, and a two-way ANOVA. Also, the Kolmogorov-Smirnov was used, and Mann-Whitney. The results showed of the communication assessment, as I said earlier. Here are the participant demographics. You can see how many were males, how many were females, the age range, and the settings. Some were attending special schools, and some were attending kindergarten. And now you can see the age average for the intervention group, which was the children with autism, and for the typically developing children. Some other demographics as well, male and female participants. This comes as no surprise, as most of us know that males with ASD are more than females. The age distribution. And the main findings include that no statistically significant differences between male and female participants were noted, and there were statistically significant differences between age groups in receptive vocabulary. The age variable in receptive vocabulary, words from objects category and abstract concepts category were more frequent as age groups were progressing. And in expressive vocabulary, no statistically significant differences were found. This is a very interesting finding in this research, as we can see that regarding receptive vocabulary, children tend to learn some concepts, but in expressive vocabulary, even though their age is as they were getting older, their expressive vocabulary did not become more frequent. So the receptive vocabulary, there were made some comparisons between the first group and the second group, the ASD group and the control group. The statistically significant differences were found between those groups. The control group participants had higher receptive vocabulary scores than ASD children, and they recognized more words from the categories of abstract concepts, objects, animals and people, and actions. Those were the main 4 categories of words that were found. And in expressive vocabulary, the statistically significant differences were found between groups again, and children with ASD used the speech less frequently in comparison to control group children. And children with ASD did not use words that refer to actions or animals or people. This is the two-way ANOVA control. The main effects of participants' gender was not statistically significant, as well as the interaction between the two variables. Here, with the two-way ANOVA, we took as variables the age and the gender of participants combined, and wanted to test the effects on their vocabulary. And on the contrary, the main effects of age were found to be statistically significant again. The test-retest reliability was checked with a Pearson correlation, with the Pearson correlation coefficient, and now you can see it in each category, in receptive and expressive vocabulary separately. And finally, we managed to compile a core vocabulary for children with autism. Here you can see the words. I translated them from Greek to the English language. The original is in Greek. In the objects you can see car, pear, milk, tree, and other words. In abstract concepts there are colors, numbers, places, and abstract means. And in actions they are verbs, and animals and people include what the category says for itself. Here are the other words. And I forgot to mention that here we added some more concepts, which I did not include here, to make the vocabulary more functional and to augment its range. So this is the pilot study design. 6 participants participated in the pilot study, 6 children with ASD again. They did not participate in the previous study. This is the second part of the study with other children. It's a pilot study with which we wanted to test the effectiveness of the AC device and the core vocabulary. 4 children were male and 2 children were female, and the ages were those that you see in the table. All had ASD and all also had intellectual disability. Some had moderate and some had mild intellectual disability. There were 3 phases: familiarization phase, intervention phase, and generalization phase with 1-week interval. You can see the durations. And the settings were at school and at home. The first 2 phases were conducted at school and the last one was conducted at home. The pilot study was conducted with the use of an ASC device, and when I'm talking about an ASC device, I mean a tablet with an ASC application. The application's name was Seaboard. Pre-experimental design was used with double assessments before and after, pre and post, as we say in research. An analysis of qualitative and quantitative data was made, and the observation documentation with checklists was made also. And here I have it in Greek, and I'm going to translate it to you. Those are the 4 categories that were based on the contexts in which children interact the most. The first one being activities, outdoor activities. The second one being at home. The third one being at school, and the last one being at the doctor. The vocabulary depiction was made with mulberry symbols. They are very similar to PEC symbols, as you can see in the pictures. The qualitative measures were requesting, communication initiations, using additional vocabulary and words, and frequency of spoken words, verbal communication. Then the researcher, me, chose the reinforcers for each participant. So for requesting, which was the first measure, the number of valid responses in requesting was calculated using the following algorithm. And the results appear here. This is those are the results for student A1. Familiarization phase, intervention phase, and generalization phase. And so as to help you understand the results better, I am noting below the characteristics of the participant. It's a male, almost 8 years old, with moderate ID and ASD, and his communication level was at one-word communication at the start of the intervention. And you can see the mean standard deviation, the range, and the median, and also the average in each one of the categories. For participant A2, which was a little older, with moderate ID, participant A3, during the 3 phases, with mild ID. The fourth one also had mild ID and was a little older. And here you can see, for example, at the generalization phase, in the frequency of spoken words, the range is between 10 and 11, while here you can see the participant A5, and the range is between 1 and 3. So there are many differences between those two, if you see in the last scores. And participant A6 also had some good outcomes. And conclusions. The first research question is answered like from the study derived 79 core words, which were categorized in 4 groups: objects, abstract concepts, actions, and animals and people. Children with ASD use speech much less than their typically developing peers. They also rarely use words that refer to actions or other people. The second research question was answered with communication in children with ASD is mainly affected by age, intellectual disability, feelings of weariness, and environment and interactions. Those are results that came up from those that I showed you earlier, but I didn't include important information because we are short on time. The third research question, the application of an intervention with the use of a high-tech AAC device resulted in the augmentation of the children with ASD's vocabulary, as they used even more words than they already knew. The fourth research question, the categorization of words according to the context that they were mostly used into had positive effects combined with the assistive technology device, as they could more easily navigate through the application and find what they wanted to say. And the fifth research question was that the high-tech device, which was a tablet combined with the customizable AAC application, had positive effects in enhancing the communication of children with ASD. The sixth research question was the emergence of speech for all participants with ASD was higher than before the pilot study was carried out, and the children repeated the newly acquired vocabulary frequently, maintaining that behavior throughout almost all sessions. And the last research question was that the generalization of the newly acquired vocabulary was achieved as high communication levels were observed for each participant. AAC can make everyday life of children with ASD and communication deficits easier. There is a plethora of different AAC means and devices today, like other technological means, but and the procedure of choosing the specific type should be made by specialists and parents who can assess the capabilities of each child. When using AAC, it's important to follow some evidence-based practices in order to achieve the best results and be realistic and progress according to the capabilities of the child. Assistive technology means are characterized by stable and predictable reactions, like I said also in my previous presentation. And those are features that have been proven to be effective for this group of children in gaining communication skills and using them accordingly in different contexts. The findings are suggesting that children with ASD benefited from this intervention and positive results emerged. And as a closing remark, it's imperative that children with ASD overcome the obstacles that emerge due to their difficulties in communication, and AAC can give them a voice to express their wants and needs. Thank you very much.